This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Saturday Social with me, Will Mercer. Today I am joined by Paula Moses from Permanent Education, and we're going to be talking about her PhD research in the primary curriculum's role in helping children succeed in life.
Hi.
Hi, Paula.
Hi. You.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Okay, thanks everybody for listening and welcome to Paula. Hi, Paula. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. I'm going to get my apologies in early if I do start coughing away because, you know, like every other teacher in the world right now, I have a cold because it's just that time of year where everyone gets ill. So I've got my cough sweets at the ready and everything. I'm fully prepared. But no, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm here in Tokyo. It's cold, just like it is in the UK, though maybe we haven't had any snow yet. And I'm actually quite excited because I moved. Well, my wife and we moved last week. So this is my very first show from my new apartment and crucially testing out the new internet connection.
Great, fantastic. Well, you're sounding very loud and clear, so it's fine. You moved to Tokyo. When did you do that? Because I did know of you briefly in this country when you were working. Is it Suffolk, Cambridgeshire?
Essex. I was living in Cambridgeshire, working Essex. Yeah. So I moved. So my wife and we came over here. Last summer it was. Last August. So it was quite a change. I was working in Essex. I was in a primary school over there in the state sector. But now I'm in a startup international school here. So as you can imagine, there's just so much change. But it's a great learning experience.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So tell me about how things are going with you. How's your week been?
Well, yes, I've got my son and girlfriend who have both got colds as well, so I'm doing my best to avoid them because I've got 1 week left where I'm sort of trying to edit and probably, to be honest, rewrite my PhD just to submit for the first final approval or whatever it is before I submit it. So it's a very kind of solitary life this week. I'm just writing and writing and writing. And
wow. Well, thank you for making the time for us because I can only imagine, the pressure, the time pressure you're under and everything, but we really do appreciate it. So you mentioned the research. I mean, shall we get straight into it? I mean, do you want to tell us what the title of your research is and what it's about?
Sure. Okay. So in 2019, Ofsted, who are the regulators of education in England, brought out a education inspection framework. It's all sounding very easy so far, isn't it? And they brought out this framework, which had in the intent section, teachers will know what I mean by that, in the intent section, it said that curriculum should be designed with the cultural capital and knowledge needed to succeed in life. And at that time, I was working in the school and I was looking at it, and it had been sort of around for a few months before that in draft form. But my immediate thought was, well, what is success in life anyway? Because we're always thinking about that, aren't we? Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? And how do we know, and who decides, and when do we know if we get to that point? And how on earth would I, as a school leader at the time, know if my pupils had achieved that? Obviously without thinking quite deeply. So I was interested that this was an aim of the curriculum. And so that was sort of the spark, I suppose, thinking, how on earth do you design a curriculum to enable all, because that's the other thing in the line, it says all learners. all
Mm,
learners, and you're looking at
mm,
your school and you're thinking, okay, all learners to succeed in life.
hmm.
So it
It's
just
definitely
piqued my
ambitious, isn't
interest.
it?
Well, I don't know, but it's just interesting. It piqued my interest because I was just sort of sympathising, I suppose, as well with everybody out there who was also responsible for the curriculum in their schools or their trusts, and thinking,
Mm.
because this is in the light of the fact
So
that
sorry, Paula. I'm going to jump in there. I don't know if you're moving around or something, but I'm
oh
hearing a
yes,
bit of scraping.
probably.
I didn't quite hear the last thing you said there.
Oh no, that's okay. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm not very good at sitting still. Um, uh, I think I was just sympathising with all the people out there who were in my position, trying to make sure
Mm,
that we offered a good quality of education in our schools,
hmm,
and just thinking, where on earth would you start? But
hmm,
also in the context of the fact that state schools in England are expected to deliver the national curriculum. And so it
mm,
was, where's the wriggle room in that, and what do we do? And there is a sort of a
hmm,
scope to add to the national curriculum, but we'll probably
hmm.
come on to that as part of the discussion. But
Well,
that was it, really.
sorry to interrupt you, but let me ask you there. So I think success in life. I mean, obviously, it sparked your interest because it, it's an important topic. Of course, no one would dispute that, but there will be some subjectivity and there will be some controversy to that because people will define it differently. Um, so, I mean, did you have uh, obviously saying children succeeding in life is a clear enough sounding aim, but did you find there was much guidance from Ofsted on what success actually looks like?
No guidance. No, well, there's nothing that says this is what we envisage.
Mm.
There are lots of phrases within all of the various documents that school leaders need to read about. Happy. Well, actually, no. I'm going to take that back. There's nothing about happy children, but there's lots of guidance, but nothing that defines success in life.
Mm, mm,
Interestingly, in the phrase that was the spark for my research was also this suggestion that knowledge and cultural capital were the key ingredients if you
mhm,
want to provide all learners with what's needed to succeed in life. Sorry, it's
mm,
a bit of a but it's making sure that I don't paraphrase what they say. So
mhm,
there was also very little definition in terms of what this knowledge and cultural capital was beyond
mhm,
what was already in the curriculum.
mm,
There was a little bit, there was a little bit that talked about. I think Ofsted were questioned about what is this knowledge and cultural capital, and they sort of referred to the fact that it was, referred to the sort of the conversations at the time, or just, well, actually a few years before, where the new curriculum was designed, where it was all about
mm.
making sure that children had access to the best of what had been thought and said,
Yeah.
um,
Mhm,
which is a whole other conversation, and also sort of a knowledge-rich economy, a knowledge-rich curriculum. Sorry,
mm,
and the cultural capital bit was very vague. So
mm,
I was curious to find out about that. I think the final sort of point on this is that if we look in any depth at policy documents, you will
mhm,
find lots of words that are used that if you skim over the surface, they seem like, oh yeah, of course we want our pupils to succeed in life.
mhm,
But
mhm,
I think what's forgotten is that there's some person sat at a desk somewhere or in a group meeting or something who are actually responsible for putting together and delivering and achieving
mm,
a curriculum that will do this. And so I was kind of interested in, how do these lovely words become real curricula and real lives, I
mm.
suppose.
No, I that's fascinating. I totally agree with you. I think, I suppose maybe this is a feature if you have a statewide education system with centralized documents. You have to come up with something that, at least on the face of it, is pretty uncontroversial. At least on the face of it, like you say, most people would accept. But at the same time, schools always reflect their local context in all sorts of ways. Schools are one school will be extremely different to another one. Of course they will. So you have to sort of find that kind of mix of generalizability, if that's the word I'm looking for, and
Yeah.
also sort of specificness. I mean, I think
Well,
maybe.
can I just, sorry, may I just say something on that?
Yeah,
I
please
think
do,
that
please.
what you're saying about schools reflecting their local environments, I think that again is a question as to whether how much schools are able to do that or want to do that. One of the other questions that came up was, to what extent is this sort of description of a curriculum sort of in a way suggesting that there is one type of success, and then that sort of led me to believe, well, what is that type of success and who decides, and how are schools reacting to that, and how are schools operating? I mean, it's a massive subject, because it's in a context of an education landscape in England, which is not just local primary schools, in their local environment, operating as partners in their local community. There's a lot of variation, and so I think that we can't assume that schools are reflecting their local communities. And the other thing is that we can't assume that what everybody thinks is success in life is necessarily, like you said, it's not going to be the same. But what I was interested in is, if this is going to be an aim of the national curriculum, and it wasn't as if it was sort of in a long rambling speech by somebody who was thinking aloud. It's actually in a line of the education inspection framework, which head teachers and SLTs will print off and hold in their hands and think, right, what are we doing? And it was it's very, very clear. It's a bullet point. It's there. And I just think that if we are going to have something that schools are going to be measured against, then we need to be sort of honest and open about the clarity of what those measures are. I suppose. What I think is success in life and what you think is success in life is very different. But where it gets a bit sort of murky even is, how can we possibly know what success in life is for our pupils, teachers, families, etc. And then that makes me, the philosopher in me, makes me worry that we're making assumptions about people, which I'm always very nervous about.
No, absolutely. And well, let's try to answer that question then that's been raised. I mean, did your understanding of what success looks like in life, I mean, did that change as you were doing your research, or did you find you had an initial reaction that kind of proved true throughout it?
No, the thing is, I am a dyed-in-the-wool philosophy for children practitioner, and so I always try and come to any kind of research with an open mind. And that is easier said than done. But I genuinely did want to come to it and find out. I think that we all go through different journeys in our lives. And, I've been through all sorts of situations where on the surface I might have seen to be successful, but not felt it, or felt successful but not looked at. And I was just aware that it was a complex subject, I suppose, and I was expecting to get lots of different answers. However, what I really wanted to do was sort of just to keep in mind that if this is an aim of something that schools are going to be measured against, then are there any truths? Are there any? And in social research, we don't find the truth. We just edge our way towards it. But are there any? Is there anything that's ubiquitous? For most people that would make sense as a kind of a driving force for a curriculum. So that was it really. And me as a 50-year-old woman, I was talking to 10-year-olds and parents and teachers. I can't possibly, what I think is success in life for me is very different to what I would have thought of myself at 10 if I was even thinking.
Yeah, no, of
So,
course, of course. That's the thing that will change with your perspective, as life goes on. So tell us, how did you? So you've got this question, you've got this very interesting area, this reason for investigating it. So how did you go about? What was your methodology?
okay, so I've mentioned philosophy of children, but also that's within a kind of a wider kind of approach to education that I've developed through my career as a teacher, but also prior to being a teacher, I worked with lots of employers. I worked for a sector skills council, and I used to have to wrangle together employers from the film and computer games and animation industry in the very early days of computer games in the 90s, trying to get them all to sit around a table together to agree on things so that we could put together skills strategies or funding from the government, things like that. So I was used to herding cats.
Always very useful as a teacher. Yeah, always a very useful skill to have.
But what I was keen to do is hear it from people's mouths. So I kind of I did adopt a kind of a very facilitatory approach, and sort of what I think is irrelevant approach, which is what I like to do as a teacher, full stop. But that's very different to how things are now. But so what I did is I first went in. I worked with two schools, one in Oldham and one right on the edge of Oldham and Manchester in England, in the north of England, northwest of England. And they were part of the same trust, but they were very contrasting in terms of their socioeconomic makeup, constituency. And this was because the government in the Ofsted statement, the children who are classified as disadvantaged or special needs were identified in this statement as being in particular need of cultural capital and knowledge. So I then thought, well, one is I don't really know what success in life is. Two, what is this knowledge and cultural capital thing? And then three, why is it those children in particular who were in need of it? So I wanted to kind of get a good spread of children. So then I put together a questionnaire that all the parents from the year 5 children, sorry, I'm not being very clear, but the year 5 children from across those two schools, their parents were invited to complete an online questionnaire with a range of questions about success in life. The first one being, what's the first word that comes to mind, or what's the first thought that comes to mind when you think of success in life? And then from those questionnaires with the parents, I then asked parents if they wanted to self-select to kind of be part of a more in-depth individual interview. So that was one stream of the research. The other stream of the research is with the pupils. So there were 45 pupils across these two schools in year 5. And I chose year 5 because they are any primary school teacher will know that they're a brilliant age group. They know everything, which is brilliant, but they are really, really interesting and sparky, but they're not in that final SATs year. So it was sort of an interesting way of getting them.
That definitely makes sense. All year groups to choose, for sure.
Exactly. So I went into the schools and they were given a questionnaire, a paper copy of the questionnaire to complete, draw and write, and illustrate and annotate the questionnaire in any way they wanted to. And the questions went through same questions for the parents and the children. They went through, what do you think success in life is? And then various questions looking at the concept from different angles. So do you think friends and family have a role to play in success in life? Do you think that money or possessions, qualifications, and I can explain why I chose those particular things. And they filled them in on their own, so that they could get sort of their unadulterated views, really. So that was the first stage with the pupils. Do you want me to carry on? It was quite an involved process.
No. Please do, because I'm just listening, taking down my notes. There's so much to go with here.
People going quiet.
No. I'm listening. Rapt attention. That's what you got from me. This is great. Well, can I interrupt though? But ask about friends, family,
Yeah,
money, qualifications.
yeah.
Were those the four sort of big? Were those the four big factors you were
You know,
looking
you're
at?
asking me something. I'm not very good at remembering these kind of things, but basically, what I did is um, I took the term cultural capital comes
Mm,
from a French philosopher sociologist in the 60s who identified cultural capital as a specific thing. And now cultural capital
mm,
sits within lots of other capitals, which are like social capital, which is the networks and the people that you have in your life.
mhm,
Um, there is economic capital, which is money.
mhm,
But then within cultural capital, he defined that there were three different areas. There
mhm,
was embodied cultural capital. So it's the kind of the if you think cultural capital is the attitudes and dispositions and habits and behaviours of a person,
mhm,
that's basically it. So embodied is the habits, dispositions, attributes, etc., that you embody.
mhm,
Then there's sort of institutionalized cultural capital. So that's things like qualifications, accreditations. It's the stuff that you can sort of put on your CV.
mhm,
And then if there are any Bourdieusian scholars out there, they'll be rolling the. But this is very, very potted history. And then there's also objectified cultural capital, which is
mhm,
around what you own, but
mhm.
also not so much economic necessarily, but those signifiers of your
I'm going to
state.
interrupt Paula to I'm going to jump on what you just said there. If there are any scholars rolling in their graves out there, please do text in on the Podbean app. Send us your questions. Send us your comments. We can respond to them live. And if you
Okay,
have any ideas on what culture on cultural capital or what success in life looks like, please do text in as well. Sorry, Paula.
yeah. Yes, no, great. I'm always interested
Mm,
to hear another perspective because when you're writing a PhD, you're always sort of like living in fear that you've missed some crucial bit of information that you should have put in your literature review.
mhm,
But so the objectified is quite interesting because it's all those kind of possessions, those kind of signifiers of your culture,
mhm,
and sort of anecdotally, people will talk about, oh, kids who grow up in a house full of books or a house without books, or it might
mhm,
be the kind of car you drive, or it might be, and it's all about signifying your sort of status in society, where you are, where you don't want to be, where you do want to be, that kind of stuff. So it's a
mhm.
complex subject, as you can probably tell. So
No,
what
it's
I
great,
tried
great.
to do in a kind of a 10-year-old friendly way was
Mm,
organise questions loosely around that,
mhm,
around those things without saying, what do you think about institutionalized cultural capital? Because God, I
mm,
didn't even know what that was 3 years ago. But
mhm,
so I did that, and as any primary school teacher will know, the things I got back was so precious and wonderful. Drawings, explanations, and suggestions, and absolutely rich and detailed and wonderful. So
brilliant.
that was one thing. And then what I did with that is I took the answers to the first question. What's the first thought that you have when I say success in life? I took those answers
Mhm,
and I went back the next day and I used those answers in small groups this time. And I used them as the stimulus for a deeper sort of conversation about the whole subject. So, for anybody who's familiar with philosophy for children or not, basically what you do is what I did was, and it's not purely philosophy for children. It's kind of my version of it. I'm
mm,
calling it. Um, it's a type of phenomenology which is about really trying to get to the essence of the concept. Really
mm,
trying to get to what is this thing that we're talking about. And so
mhm,
we use those first ideas from the children, the pupils, to say, okay, well, you said this, 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 and this. Shall we try and play some? So we played some concept games where we put them in orders of importance. We
mhm,
tried to, and then they came up with questions that they thought were relevant to the topic, that they then chose. Um, They then chose. Sorry, I'm just panicking now because you're going to ask me what the questions are, and I will be able to find them.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You just.
So they then chose a question in each group to then discuss. So the way that it works, the way that collaborative inquiry works, is that they then, a question comes to the surface, emerges to the surface that they all think is worthy of discussion in the group. And it's a question that they can't necessarily answer on their own. And then we sort of would spend some time discussing that. Then you sort of go, okay, well, what do we think now at the end? It's very interesting to see whether people have changed their mind, whether it's enriched their understanding.
Fantastic. Sorry, Paula. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in and interrupt you there, and we're going to take a quick break there. And I am giving you a chance to go and find those questions as well, if you want to. Yeah. Lovely. So, talk to you in a second.
Yes.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Parentkind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents.
Are you ready to enhance your assessments in a world where AI is transforming education? Join Toddle for an exclusive event, Designing Assessments with AI, a live session tailored just for UK educators. Explore practical strategies to keep your assessments both effective and fair as AI continues to reshape education. Hear from experts Darren Coxon and Dale Bassett, who'll guide you through designing authentic assessments and navigating AI's biggest challenges. It's happening on December the 2nd from 4 to 6:30 p.m. Don't miss out on this opportunity to discover how you can adapt your assessment strategies for the future of education. Register for free at toddleapp.com/UKAI and secure your spot now.
Hey educators, ready to kickstart 2025 with world-class inspiration? Then don't miss Bet UK, happening January 22nd to 24th in London. Get fired up in our high-energy arena hosted by Laura McInerney with an incredible lineup. Hear from racing driver and inclusion advocate Nicholas Hamilton and the poetic power duo Michael Rosen and Christian Foley. Plus, don't miss the legendary Stephen Fry discuss the human approach to AI. Explore hundreds of hours of unmissable content, the latest edtech, and free CPD opportunities to supercharge your skills. All for free, so why wait? Head to betshow.com and book your ticket now. Let's make 2025 your best year yet.
And welcome back to the Saturday Social with me, Will Mercer. I'm joined by Paula Moses from Permanent Education. We are discussing her research into the curriculum and its role in helping children succeed in life and cultural. And we've talked a lot about the concept of cultural capital. So if we go back, Paula, to your research you're talking about. So, I mean, I'm trying to sort of picture it in my mind here. You've got these different schools. Now, you said where you're doing your research, and you said that they were different different socioeconomic contexts. So I'm going to go ahead and guess. So you said they were once Oldham, Manchester, but so similar parts of the country geographically, but I'm going to guess one has maybe, a more middle class school and the other one not so much.
Yes, so one is more sort of urban adversity, and then the other one was in a little village just outside Manchester. The thing about Manchester is that you can get out into villages in the countryside quite quickly, but then similarly on the other way, you can very quickly find yourself in sort of an urban university. But the reason why, and I could probably have written a thesis on just the term disadvantaged, but the reason why I wanted to do that was because of this sort of suggestion that disadvantaged, and this is a government term, disadvantaged and SEND pupils, so pupils with special educational needs and disabilities, were particularly in need. And so I was just curious about that, because I thought that was quite a sweeping statement. And so what I did is, to put it crudely, one school had more children classified as disadvantaged and SEND than the other. And I was just curious to see whether there are any differences. I haven't actually sort of cut the data in that way yet, because when my research comes out, you'll see that it's not necessarily that relevant. There's nuances in terms of what disadvantage means, and so in terms of like some of the responses that we got. So that was it. But they were schools that were willing to take part. They had children who knew how to operate in the way that I wanted to, so it saved a kind of a bit of time in terms of training the children to sort of work in that collaborative, philosophical way.
Great. So you're there in the schools. You've got the children talking about these categories of success in life. So we're saying qualifications, money, happiness, friends, family. And what are you finding? What are the children saying to you?
Well, you say happiness, but I didn't ask them about happiness, but they did.
Sorry,
Freudian
slip there.
No, it's okay. No, well, I did it earlier because actually, I don't know if you're a parent or not, but if you asked a parent what they wanted for their child, a lot of people, because obviously I kind of harass people on the streets almost, what do you think? People will say, oh, I just want my child to be happy. But then I also know that actually, does that come out in how you interact with the children? Does it come out in the way that in the expectations that you have on those children? And this can be sort of thought about on lots of different levels. So it can be thought about from teachers to children, parents to children. It can be thought about on a kind of a national level. Do we actually want our pupils, our children, to be happy? But it all comes back to what you think success in life is, because this is supposed to be the aim of the curriculum that schools put together.
Well, I think it's one of those, again, like you say, children to succeed in life. On the face of it, seems like such a. It seems the kind of thing no one could disagree with, because, well, I mean, I always. When I hear these things, I always think, well, would anyone say the opposite? Is there any school out there which would ever seriously say, we don't want our children to succeed in life? Of course not. Yeah. Of course, every school would say that. And I think happiness is such an interesting one as well, because it comes up, teachers think about it. We ask ourselves, are our children meeting these metrics? Are they able to do this? Are they able to, do they have that knowledge? But I think we're all interested in the welfare of children. We all want our children to be happy. Again, applying the opposite test, there is no school out there that would say we aim to churn out unhappy children. Of course they wouldn't. But what does happiness really look like? I mean, someone might say, oh, well, for children to be happy, they need to be fulfilled. And for them to be fulfilled, they need to be able to fulfill their own potential. Therefore, they need to have a really rigorous, knowledge-based education that allows them to, get the most out of their life. It's just one way of putting it. Another school might be much more focused on, I don't know, on educating the whole child on sort of the dispositions almost. But like you say, parents obviously go straight to that. But what about the children? Did they sort of talk about happiness as being this important?
Well, believe it or not, they had a rich and varied answer to the question, but they did talk about happiness a lot. They did talk about, there was the odd mention of a Tesla and a mansion. But on the whole, when I've asked adults at conferences where I've been, what do you think the young people want to be able to succeed in life? They will often say, oh, it's about being famous, it's about being this, it's being that. There's a view of young people that not everybody, obviously. Everything that I say needs to be caveated because et cetera, et cetera. But there is a view that young children are very materialistic, and that they're always on their phones, and that they don't think deeply about life. And as a society, or as a school, or as a teacher, or as a parent, or as a friend, are we actually practicing what we preach? Are we doing what we say we think, or what we think we're doing? A lot of the teachers that I interviewed, because the other part of it was that I also interviewed teachers in these schools confidentially, but there was lots of nuance. They were relatively experienced teachers, so they'd sort of been through the introduction of the new curriculum. There were a couple of new teachers, but on the whole, the pressure of being a teacher came through. The pressure of covering content came through, and then there was also this kind of slight. It's a bit of a dramatic term, but this kind of moral injury, really, that they really did feel that they couldn't teach in the way that they wanted to teach.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because I'd written a note to myself here, moral, because I think it's something that's very implied in a lot of what you've said already, and I think most teachers would agree with, is that there is a sort of moral element to what we're doing with these children's lives, in the sense that we are asking children and their parents and so on. We're asking people who send their children to school to entrust us with years and years of their lives, this formative period they will never get back. And it's not simply a case of doing a good job. It's a case also, there's got to be some sort of moral component to it as well. I think we have to honestly believe that what we're teaching is worth knowing, or is worth having, or is worth being taught in of itself. I don't know if education can be wholly end target based and still be called education properly. I feel sorry, I mean, I'm getting into deep waters here.
No,
I'm
it's
probably going to
great.
end up,
It's lovely.
but I think the success in life thing, I absolutely get it. I understand it. I understand why it's an attractive aim, but I think if someone is expecting success in life to be purely external validation, or to be hitting a set of targets, or to be get to university, or get a well-paid job, or these achievements of being famous was one you mentioned earlier. I think maybe we're sort of missing the point. I mean, there a deeper level, of human thriving, which is not really that we have to. That's very difficult for anyone to attain. Children or adults. Sorry, I'm like I say, I'm getting into very deep waters. I'm probably floundering a bit, but it's so fascinating.
Please don't apologise, and welcome to my world for the last 4.5 years.
You're living this is your everyday. Wow. It's great.
And also, I've done all sorts of things in my life, and some very challenging things, some not so, but never until now have I literally sat at my desk with my head in my hands thinking, what do I think about this? It's that kind of, there is a responsibility to this. And I felt that responsibility very heavily when I was a teacher, and I was a school leader, and I was briefly a head teacher. It is a massive responsibility. And for anybody who, knows about Dewey, who is an educationalist, he talked about education is not just a preparation for life, it is life itself. So when children are at school, they are not thinking, because this is where the time-space continuum comes in. When they are at school, they are not thinking, in the future. They might be thinking a little bit about the future, but that 5 years that those children maybe are in, key stage 2 or 1 or whatever, those few years, they're minuscule for us. 5 years in the lifetime of us is relatively small. If you are 7, those 5 years from 7 to 12 are huge. That's your life. And so we need to just think about, is it about preparation for an end game, like you said, or what about the life that they're living at the moment? So the interactions that they're having with their friends, their family, their teachers, the experiences that they have, at school that, could help build their sort of sense of self.
It's so interesting because I think one of the things about cultural capital is something, I remember learning about it. First came across it. It's been talked about for years now in education, and I wonder because it can spark a lot of debate. Let's put it that way. And I feel one of the reasons, to put it mildly, and one of the many reasons why that is, I think there's this moral element that we've talked about. There's a sense that once we've decided what we're going to teach children, we should believe that it is really worth teaching. It has a powerful, it's a should rather than just something that rather than being something that it's good for them to know, it's really something that they should know, that if we didn't teach them would be a bad thing. But there's also a class element as well. I think there's this sense where, we talked earlier about local contexts, and I think some people have. I'm going to suppose some people have a fear, perhaps, of imposing what they would see as a one-size-fits-all sort of view of what culture is and what culture is worth knowing. So I know quite recently. So I'm like I said, I'm here in Japan, but I do try to keep an eye on what's raging on Twitter and education in the UK. And I know there was something recently about Shakespeare being taught or possibly not becoming statutory anymore in secondary schools, and a big debate about that. And I guess what I'm saying is cultural capital can it be universal across a nation? Or is it always going to be hyper local? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so there are more than a couple of things, but this is a really important point. So when going back to the beginning of our discussion, when Ofsted were asked, well, what do you mean by knowledge and cultural capital? They said, it's to do with, what is written in the national curriculum, which is about making sure that children, are taught the best of what's been thought and said. Okay, so that they actually use that.
Surely.
So, that's a huge phrase, and all sorts of things zing off that when you hear that phrase. That came from a phrase from an education inspector called Matthew Arnold 150 years ago, and he talked about what is the best of what's been thought and known, or I can't remember now. I'll be able to get it for you, but yeah. So it's about that. However, he also talked about that knowledge being a way of, like you said, getting to know what matters to us most. He said the best of what's been thought and said in the world, but then using that knowledge to, think about what we're taking for granted, what we're assuming about society. And I think his phrase was something like, turning a stream of fresh and free thought upon our stock notions and habits. Yeah. So he was kind of railing against the kind of very rote learning approach at the time. And that
sounds like a warning against complacency, surely.
Yeah. However, that phrase has now been used. It's kind of gone through the mill of education. And it is now much more linked to an educationist called Hirsch, who talked about the core knowledge, all Americans, the 5,000 things that Americans need to know, and having actual identified pieces of knowledge that we know. Okay, so this is a very windy turn. But then when Michael Gove set up, or was talking to the Education Select Committee before setting up the new national curriculum in England, he talked about the best being Shakespeare, Wagner, Balzac, And he talks about popular culture being, cheap sensation, easy pleasure, things like that. Very, very sort of dismissive of anything that wasn't sort of in the canon. Now, if I ask you what you think the best is, and what I ask, I don't know, my neighbour or me or whoever, I don't know what it is. But more importantly, when I go to schools where there is, because I work a lot in schools all over the country, but when I go to a school, say a secondary school, where every child has a different background in terms of their race or ethnicity or religion, if I say to them, so I'm just assuming that the best is, what Michael Gove said, which is Shakespeare, Balzac, and Wagner. Wagner is English, but then is that right? And they look at me blankly and they go, well, what about this writer from Ethiopia, or what about this singer from? And it just doesn't. It's almost a bit embarrassing if I sort of ask them, because there's a lot more out there. So you're right, and then it does tip into the who decides what the best is, and I do think we need to be a bit cautious about that, because Arnold said that we need this knowledge to then be able to have a fresh and free approach to, things that we take for granted. And so that's one of the questions, are we doing that? Are we letting children use that knowledge as a way of creating something new? So, for example, on the radio this morning, there was a wonderful interview with an actress who is going to be Shylock in The Merchant of Venice. And that was traditionally a male's role, and she's acting as a woman. And she was talking about the wonderfulness of being able to perform Shakespeare, adapting it, making it relevant, So she obviously needs to know about the play, but she is going to be, transforming it. And I think that is what Shakespeare wanted as well. Shakespeare is meant to be performed and not read in rows in classrooms. And so because Shakespeare maybe hasn't worked in the classroom in the way that it's being delivered, i.e. read it and understand it, but don't act it, heaven forbid, then of course it's not going to work. But and teachers aren't feeling like they are able to go, okay, right, what should we do with this play? Get up, everyone, let's read it, rather than just reading it in our heads.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
my turn to ramble now, Will. Sorry.
No. It's really good. I love it. I'm getting so many different threads popping up here that we can. So sorry, I'm very much mixing my metaphors, but there's so many threads we can unravel here that's so interesting. I mean, I think one thing to say is that if you have a national curriculum, well, obviously the word nation is quite literally within there. I think if you are the person, if you're on the committee and you're sitting down and you are creating, in the very act of creating a national curriculum, you are imposing some kind of universal standard across the nation. Yeah. You are saying this is worth knowing, and we think every child attending a state school in this country should learn this, and it should be assessed, and blah blah blah. And I think that's fine. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. It's not the only way to go. Obviously, that wasn't how education was in this country until the late 80s, until they brought in the national curriculum. But I think, I guess what I'm saying is, if you're going to have a national curriculum, I think you're always going to have a degree of imposition, and you're going to have a degree of some things being elevated because a central authority has elevated them. Because I don't really understand how a curriculum can be national without that central authority controlling it and running it. Now, I think if someone really wants to push back against the idea of, I think the criticism of maybe things like Shakespeare comes from two different directions. One is this idea that, that Shakespeare's all well and good, or we're picking on Shakespeare here, but it could be, anyone who appears in the curriculum. Let's say Steinbeck. Yeah, exactly. I think his critical reputation will survive intact after this, I'm sure. But I think sometimes people criticize it because they just want to change what's on it. They don't have a problem with the concept of things being elevated and being held up and presented to children as a very high culture. They just want to change what the high culture is. They want to maybe let more writers in, maybe ones from different backgrounds or different parts of the world or whatever. But I think the other way is criticizing it is saying that no, nothing should be elevated by the state or by diktat by a department. And I suppose the natural conclusion of that is abolishing any kind of national curriculum and a return to local authorities and maybe the schools themselves deciding what they are going to teach children. But of course, that would be a very dramatic turn of events. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No,
Sorry, I correct myself. I suppose academies, to some extent, I mean, in practice, I know many of them do follow the national curriculum, but of course, many do actually decide what they teach themselves. So I suppose I should take that back. There is maybe a move towards that to some extent.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, I think the thing is that there are some absolutely brilliant schools, academies, trust leaders out there, teachers out there. It's just whether as a system we are enabling what we think is necessary for all learners to achieve success in life. I'm very aware that, and again, I'm in that state where when you write a PhD, you're supposed to know what you're talking about, but you're very humbled by what you don't know because you've done so. But, there are some people out there and tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the people out there who are doing either the parents, not the parents, well, maybe parents, the teachers, the school leaders, the heads of department, the trust leaders, they are doing what they're doing, if it is an example of, something innovative or whatever, despite the system. And sometimes that can take its toll on people. And so, for example, I read some literature that talked about, just going back to Shakespeare briefly, but not, secondary school teachers who were trying to, teach Shakespeare in the way that it was intended, sort of on your feet, acted, played around with, etc., etc. And it was a thankless task, because although they felt that it was something that was right for their pupils, it's not recognized, it's not valued, it's not it's not part of what the kids are going to be assessed on. And so eventually you just get to a point where you just go, you know what, I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to do. And just as an aside, this worries me that means that anybody who wants to work in that way will either give up or leave. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's what some of the teachers that I interviewed said. They will say, I know that when we're learning about ancient Greece, for 7-year-olds, we want to kind of, make models and act out things and, et cetera, et cetera. But this teacher said, always in the back of my mind, we've got to keep going because I've got all this content that I need to cover. And so, they're sort of constantly they've constantly got that tension in terms of how they would like to do it and how they're expected to do it. Now, I don't think we need to just completely throw the baby out with the bathwater and go back to, the 80s. I mean, I was educated in the 70s and early 80s, and, that's a whole other ball game. But I do think there probably are some middle grounds where we can maybe value and respect the role of teachers a little bit more, to be able to make those intelligent.
I suppose this is teacher agency over the curriculum.
Yes. But also, the flip side of that is having high expectations on teachers to be able to intelligently, think about what they're teaching. Now, you can't expect a teacher to do that if they're spending all their evenings submitting data or marking books. And so there needs to be, a sort of a recognition, I think, that the role of a teacher is not to input data and to mark books. The role of the teacher is a creative one, I think. I mean, maybe you feel differently, but I think it's a creative job that can be just the best thing in the world. And that sort of dance that happens in a classroom where you're teaching in the way that you want to teach and the kids are learning, there's just nothing better. And I just got from my data, this isn't my opinion, this is from my data, the teachers just felt that they weren't able to be the teacher that they wanted to be. Doesn't mean that they want free reign completely. They just want to be sort of part of the discussion.
It's very interesting because I think we've talked a lot about the abstract and the sort of intention behind some of these things. But now what you're talking about, if I understand you, is the effect of it, the actual pragmatic effect of having a cultural capital built into Ofsted's standards. And I think that's a different, I mean, obviously you can agree with the intention, but still disagree with the implementation or the effect of it. And it sounds from what you're telling me, some of your data is telling you exactly that. This is a hindrance. It's not a help. Hello, Paula. You there?
No, you did the Dalek impression and then disappeared. So sorry about that. That was my fault.
No, that's not sorry.
I've got all my I've got all my bands up and I've got full throttle and everything. So I don't know.
Fantastic.
Keep going.
Okay. No, well, I was just going to say, I mean, because there's the intent behind cultural capital, and it can be a very noble aim. There's this idea that there's this wonderful stuff out there, and it would be that can genuinely enrich someone's life, that can contribute to success in life in quite a broad way. Let's say return to old Shakespeare. We talked about him enough. Acquainting a child with Shakespeare, getting to learn a couple of going through a couple of plays in school, it unlocks that world. It means that as an adult, if they find themselves, the chance to go see some Shakespeare, I don't think they will be intimidated by it in a way that perhaps they might have been intimidated by it if they were never to have done it in school. I mean, classical music is another example. I think often people perceive it to be an elitist world where you have to have a lot of knowledge to even go in and appreciate it. Whereas it's the kind of thing, it's the sort of culture that schools can teach to their children. And it does involve a bit of teaching. A lot of them may not naturally be coming across that in their home life. But once schools have given children the key, just that bit of knowledge and that confidence to access this world, it opens up a horizon, which, again, I'm mixing my metaphors, but it opens up this new vista that was not there for children at all. And so I guess what I'm saying is, if I'm taking a position here, I do think schools should be teaching children about great, wonderful, magical things that people have made that are out there in the world. And maybe because the culture of, let's say, what's on TikTok or YouTube or whatever, children can access that themselves. They have the keys already. Maybe what schools should be doing is looking for the sorts of things that children could really benefit from or could really get into, but that they wouldn't necessarily get into if a school didn't sort of, like I say, give them the key already.
Yeah, I think all that and more. So the Keys Club is something that the sociologist Diane Ray talked about, and this is what Bourdieu talks about. He said, yes, of course, I think that it's important. So this is me now talking. I'll come back to them in a minute. Yes, I think it's important that the participants of my research, the pupils of my research, want to know stuff. They want knowledge and they want to learn. And they want that stuff. However, I think the thing is, ask yourself, how do you learn? And then this is another thing. Well, it depends, and it depends, who I am and where I am and who's teaching me and how I feel, and do I feel safe in that space, etc., etc. So I think we need to think about that. So pedagogy needs to, sort of be thought about a lot now, because it's not just about saying this is good, you must learn this. I suppose it's a bit like where it's sort of, oh, if you liked this, try this. And also, if if you have ever interacted with teenagers and, you would really like them to read, Middlemarch or, I don't know, Africana, which is a wonderful book. The best way to get them to read it is not to give it to them. You leave it lying around. You sort of get them interested. You get them curious, and it needs to kind of be their idea. And so I think you're right. It's tricky, but I think that it's about. So with younger children, perhaps there's a real sort of interest in children learning for reading for pleasure. Yeah. And that's a whole other PhD, what pleasure is, and et cetera. But reading for pleasure, is reading for pleasure for you something that is reading something that you think you should be reading, or reading something is interesting? Or so I think we just need to make it. We just need to maybe be just a little bit more conscious about what we think's good, why we think it's good, and why we think it would be good for the pupil. And then the keys to the club. So Bourdieu and other scholars who have looked at cultural capital.
I tell you what, sorry, Paula, I'm going to jump in very rudely and interrupt you there. We're going to take another quick break now, but then we're going to come back and we're going to hear about the keys to the club just after views. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. See you then.
Fantastic. Talk to you in a minute.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Parentkind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents.
Are you ready to enhance your assessments in a world where AI is transforming education? Join Toddle for an exclusive event, Designing Assessments with AI, a live session tailored just for UK educators. Explore practical strategies to keep your assessments both effective and fair as AI continues to reshape education. Hear from experts Darren Coxon and Dale Bassett, who'll guide you through designing authentic assessments and navigating AI's biggest challenges. It's happening on December the 2nd from 4 to 6:30 p.m. Don't miss out on this opportunity to discover how you can adapt your assessment strategies for the future of education. Register for free at toddleapp.com/UKAI and secure your spot now.
Hey educators, ready to kickstart 2025 with world-class inspiration? Then don't miss Bet UK, happening January 22nd to 24th in London. Get fired up in our high-energy arena hosted by Laura McInerney with an incredible lineup. Hear from racing driver and inclusion advocate Nicholas Hamilton and the poetic power duo Michael Rosen and Christian Foley. Plus, don't miss the legendary Stephen Fry discuss the human approach to AI. Explore hundreds of hours of unmissable content, the latest edtech, and free CPD opportunities to supercharge your skills. All for free, so why wait? Head to betshow.com and book your ticket now. Let's make 2025 your best year yet.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Schools Week features a report on the disadvantage gap in EYFS. According to new data, the gap is widening between the proportion of pupils eligible for means-tested free school meals achieving a good level of development when compared to their non-disadvantaged peers. The gap grew from 19.9% in 2022 to 23 to 20.5% last year. This reversed the progress logged last year according to the Department for Education data, published recently, although the data set only goes back to 2021 to 22, after changes were made to EYFS. The persistence of disadvantage gaps has become a source of consternation across the education sector. The EYFS data shows the gap is opening up among the youngest school pupils. Girls continue to outperform boys, with this gap widening for the second year running, but the difference between autumn and summer-born children narrowed at the same time frame. Full analysis of the data and further information about the disadvantage gap at post-16 A-level studies can be found on the Schools Week website. The BBC covers reports that Australia will ban children aged under 16 from using social media after its Senate approved the world's strictest bans. The ban, which will not take effect for at least 12 months, could see tech companies fined the equivalent of £25.7 million if they don't comply. The Australian Prime Minister says the legislation is needed to protect young people from the harms of social media, something echoed by parents' groups. Critics say questions over how the ban will work and the impact it may have on privacy and social connection have been unanswered. The Australian ban sets the highest age limit by any country and does not include exemptions for existing users or those with parental consent. The votes passed by 34 votes to 19, and full details can be found on the BBC News website. In a linked story, The Independent reports that just 18% of teachers think a phone ban would improve pupil behaviour, according to a recent poll. More than 2 in 5 teachers agree that mobile phones can be a teaching tool within schools. The survey of 1,001 UK teachers also suggested that only 20% feel unauthorised mobile phone use disrupts their classroom frequently, whilst the most disruptive behaviours were listed as student chatter, fidgeting and disrespect to other students. The YouGov poll also asked for teaching's top measures for improving behaviour, with the majority suggesting reducing class sizes and increased support for pupils with behavioural challenges. Further details on this aspect of the issue of mobile technology can be found on the newspaper's website. Schools Week also reports on an aspect of the recruitment issue. A report on head teacher recruitment says schools in the Northwest are the most likely to be isolated and shut out from attracting the best head teachers. The Education Policy Institute found current and future head teachers tend to work only in connected communities and were unlikely to move for work outside of those areas. This creates isolated schools left without the best head teachers. The Northwest had the largest proportion of isolated primary schools, whilst isolated secondary schools were concentrated in the West Midlands, the East of England and the South East. London attracts more than half of the most effective primary leaders. The North East is also revealed as disproportionately successful in developing and attracting highly effective head teachers, despite having a smaller share of the overall teacher workforce. It attracts the highest proportion of the most effective secondary school heads at 23%, and also trains 1/5 of the EPI ranked head teachers on whether they improved their school's test or exam results, and then checked how schools were led in terms of other metrics such as pupil progress, teacher retention and school attendance. A researcher for the EPI said the research showed government needs to encourage more localised movement across schools, and academy trusts should consider how they grow and deploy leaders in order to spread best practice. Finally, the BBC features a report on a 49-year-old exercise book. The book, discovered in a drawer of a school desk in Cornwall, has been returned to its former owner after it was discovered over half-term. The front cover of the book was shared on social media, and the owner was invited back to the school to be reunited with his property. The book was labelled Roman Studies and contained detailed sketches of an amphitheatre, Roman bathing systems and cities. The presentation of the book was exceptional, and the teacher who discovered it felt it deserved to be returned to its former owner. When the owner was asked what he might do with the book, he replied, "I was thinking of putting it in a drawer somewhere." This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
And welcome back. Thank you for listening to the Saturday Social with me, Will Mercer, and I'm joined by Paula Moses. So, Paula, just before the break, we were talking about the keys to the clubhouse.
Okay, so this is another kind of quite sort of complex area. So, cultural capital can be. So when I asked the teachers what they were doing in terms of providing cultural capital, there was a little bit of shifting around in the seats, kind of, I'm not sure what to say. I'm not sure whether what I think it is what it is. So that was quite surprising because, like you said, it's been knocking around for a bit, hasn't it? And then some people might think that it's, to do with, like we were saying, the canon, which I'm not anti-canon, by the way. I just want to make clear. It's just what you do with it, what you do with your canon. But the other thing is that a lot of teachers thought that it was to do with, trips to museums and, trips out and things like that. So there was a bit of confusion about what was the best thing. And again, just going back to the fact that this was in the guidance for school leaders, in the inspection framework. It wasn't in a sort of a speech or an essay or anything like that. It's in the guidance. If people aren't clear what cultural capital is, then or what the best is, like we've just been talking about, and furthermore, if they're not sure what success in life is, then are we running a risk of having a little bit of a sort of a confusion in terms of, like, some schools will be doing it in this way, some schools will be doing it in this way, and others, and that's fine, but it means that some people will be getting maybe a more effective package than others. And so therefore,
can I ask you then, sorry to interrupt again, but let me just ask you, because I guess your whole research has sprung from questions about what precisely is being asked of teachers and of schools. And now, I guess maybe this is an unfair question because I suppose I'm asking you to speculate here a bit, but why? Because you mentioned that this wasn't an offhand remark. This wasn't in a speech somewhere. This was a sort of presumably very well thought out statement, made very deliberately and published and pushed out to all the schools. So why was it communicated in the way it was? Why was this phrase chosen? If, as I think we've said, and I don't think it's too controversial to say, it's perhaps difficult, it will mean different things to different people. Why would it have been picked in the first place?
Well, this is the question. So if you want to look at it one way, Bourdieu, who's the original, well, it was kind of like his signature concept, really, cultural capital. Not that it hasn't existed before or after, but it's his sort of thing. He said that the thing with cultural capital is that, yes, we all have it. And there's some really interesting recent stuff that talks about we all have cultural capital. However, he talked about there being a certain type of cultural capital that is called legitimate cultural capital. And and he said that cultural capital is in societies is valued differently, different types are valued differently. And that he said that these aren't his words, his eureka moment, but his moment where he thought, this is why different children do differently at school. Okay, so it's the valuing of the cultural capital that the children have, not necessarily, whether or not a teacher thinks that Shakespeare's the best or Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which are both excellent. But it's that. And so taking that further, more recent scholars have talked about, and through research, not just speculation, have talked about, the thing is that the embodied cultural capital that we all gather through our early childhood, probably before school, or at home is the cultural capital that we take to school with us. And so teachers, I hate saying this because I hate being told that I have unconscious bias, but it has been shown through research that there is an unconscious bias within schools and some teachers which favours certain types of cultural capital. So, for example, if you have a child that turns up at school who is, willing to read, willing to receive instructions, helps out, sharpens your pencils, behaves in a certain way. I mean, I can't quite believe I'm saying this, but it has been shown through research that those children will be seen more sort of fairly. They'll be seen as more able necessarily than they are. And if you think about that, then the flip side of that is that children who maybe don't present in a way that fits in with how school would like you to behave are seen as less able than they necessarily are. And the problem with this for me is that if you're able to fit in, so if you turn up at school and you're like, okay, this is familiar because I went to nursery, or this is familiar because we've got books at home, or I've got adults that talk to me, or, et cetera, then immediately you're fitting in and it works for you. The system works for you. And so then it builds. And so you then feel more relaxed to do things. You have a go. You're received more openly by teachers. You're assumed to be better than you are. Now, if somebody assumes that you're better than you are, then you often do better because you rise to the challenge and you
this is what high expectations are all about, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the flip side of high expectations is the unconscious low expectations that we have for certain children. And so we need to just be aware of that. And the keys to the club links with Diane Ray, who is retired now, but an excellent scholar on this. Talked about it being basically the cultural capital within schools is predominantly middle class, and it's about getting all children to fit in with a certain way of being. And I think this is probably like the side of cultural capital that we need to just be conscious of and think about. So, for example, is the cultural capital that we want to give to children all to do with the canon, the text, the culture, visiting certain museums, or other aspects? I know that some schools do this already, but are there other aspects that we think would enable a child to have what they needed to succeed in life? Or is it, like most things, because life is like this, a complex mix of them all? But, one of the teachers in my research talked about not being confident enough to go away from home when she was a university student. She'd never had that experience. And so therefore she kind of closed down that opportunity to go and study abroad for a year because she didn't want to do that. Another parent talked about not wanting to go to university, even though she had the grades, because it's not for people like me. And I think that, and she described her daughter as being happy and lively at home, but at school just sort of going into herself. And just to breathe, and Diane Ray will talk about this as a kind of like a shock of habitus. So what you've known before entering this field of education and what you are experiencing is a shock. It's different. And that can be ameliorated through, the kind of pedagogy and the environment and the psychological spaces, within school, if you feel like you're accepted. But what it runs the risk of doing is turning kids off because they don't feel like they fit in, or that they don't fit in, so it makes them feel like they don't belong there.
I think this question of inclusion is such a fascinating one. I really want to return to it. We're going to take one final quick break, and then we're going to come back and continue the conversation.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Parentkind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents.
Are you ready to enhance your assessments in a world where AI is transforming education? Join Toddle for an exclusive event, Designing Assessments with AI, a live session tailored just for UK educators. Explore practical strategies to keep your assessments both effective and fair as AI continues to reshape education. Hear from experts Darren Coxon and Dale Bassett, who'll guide you through designing authentic assessments and navigating AI's biggest challenges. It's happening on December the 2nd from 4 to 6:30 p.m. Don't miss out on this opportunity to discover how you can adapt your assessment strategies for the future of education. Register for free at toddleapp.com/UKAI and secure your spot now.
Hey educators, ready to kickstart 2025 with world-class inspiration? Then don't miss Bet UK, happening January 22nd to 24th in London. Get fired up in our high-energy arena hosted by Laura McInerney with an incredible lineup. Hear from racing driver and inclusion advocate Nicholas Hamilton and the poetic power duo Michael Rosen and Christian Foley. Plus, don't miss the legendary Stephen Fry discuss the human approach to AI. Explore hundreds of hours of unmissable content, the latest edtech, and free CPD opportunities to supercharge your skills. All for free, so why wait? Head to betshow.com and book your ticket now. Let's make 2025 your best year yet.
And we're back. Thank you for listening to the Saturday Social with me, Will Mercer, and I'm joined by Paula Moses. And do not forget to text in to join the conversation. Now, Paula, I want to go back to something you mentioned that came up in your research earlier about a teacher saying university is not for people like me. And I think that really gets at something that I very much hope schools are able to do in terms of cultural capital, which is to give children, because I think it would be unfair to say that someone who believes strongly in the idea of cultural capital is trying to run a clone factory, right? I don't think it's fair to say that schools are trying to churn out children who all love Shakespeare and all love going to the opera on a Saturday evening and love doing kind of these high art, very, kind of that enjoy art that is often seen as a bit elitist. I don't think that's what schools are trying to do. But what I think schools are trying to do when they do this well is give children the means to access those worlds should they choose to do so in the future. They're sort of taking away the mystery, or maybe taking away the intimidation that people sometimes attach to these things because they never learned anything about them as a child. And maybe when they didn't learn about these things in their own schooling, that came with the implicit message that it's not for people like you. So
yeah,
tell me.
absolutely.
So sorry. I mean,
is that a question or a statement?
I think I was just thinking out loud. I'm sorry.
No, it does that to you. I think it's a tricky one because we need to be very, very clear that we're not making assumptions about what people do and don't. I think you're right. And I've done some work with Brilliant Club, as a tutor for them. You're right that there are the simple case that there are children who would not consider university for themselves. whether it's because they have low self-esteem or whether they just have a family that just don't talk about it, don't think it's necessary. I've got one young woman that I know who it's just assumed that she'll go into the family business. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when I asked her about it, she went, well, I can't really think of anything else that I would do. So, maybe she's happy, maybe she's not. I don't know. Who's to know? There are other people who might think, I was in a parents' evening once and the parents said to the pupil, you're not going to go and show us up by being really clever, are you? I mean, there's just all sorts. So, I think it's a bit different. Yeah, I think you're right. It's about showing people. So for example, the whole thing about fitting in or belonging is huge. Mm-hmm. Okay, there was an acknowledgement from the participants that, and when I say participants, I mean pupils, parents, and teachers, because I did some very in-depth interviews with parents and teachers. Of course, there's always an element in life to fitting in. Like you wouldn't go to a job interview in your pajamas, or maybe you would if it was online. You wouldn't, there are certain ways.
Shirts on the top half, pajamas on the bottom. So only a bit in camera, you're right.
Exactly. You'll be pleased to know that I actually got dressed today for you. But there are certain things that are, yep, okay, well, we do that, and we know that there are certain ways to operate in society, and if you don't know that, then you're possibly at a disadvantage. Mm-hmm. How far do you then take that? Is the next thing. And so if we are, like you said, cloning children, if we do create clones, and I'm not going to say whether I think we are or not, but if we do create clones, then are we going to, create the cultural capital of the future? Are we going to, do what Arnold said in terms of, sort of moving the thing forward? I think that probably the root of it, for me, and I'm still thinking this through because I'm writing my discussion chapter at the moment, is it's about children knowing that they have the capability. So, for example, there shouldn't be a pressure to perform just because you happen to be different to the dominant classes or different to, the dominant culture in society. Mm-hmm. There should be a way of enabling people to be the best of what they could be, but without changing themselves and fitting in to the extent that they are not being true to themselves. Mm-hmm. And that might sound a bit idealistic, but the power, if you look into psychology, which I've had to do in a very kind of superficial way because I'm not a psychologist, but if you look into psychology around belonging and self-determination and attachment, the attachment that you form with your primary caregivers when you are an infant is vital in terms of your perception of your ability, but also your perception of how you're going to come across to others and how you can interact with others. And so having that kind of confidence in yourself that you are capable of these things, but you have that choice to know how you want your life to go is different. So, that you might be very, very capable and be a 3A star student, but you want to go and study at art college and do ceramics.
And that might look like success to you.
Yeah, that might not be the path that would necessarily be seen as success within the system that we have. And all of these things come with loads of inverted commas and question marks and what do you think at the end of them. But I think that it's just worth thinking about, and then it goes back to the original point that you made about we put this thing into our very carefully thought out inspection criteria. And it sounds like, you were saying, it sounds obvious. It's like a no-brainer. Yeah, we want people to succeed in life, but what is success and whose version of success? And are we saying this, but are we actually enacting it through what we expect schools to do. So, for example, if you want your pupils to succeed in life, and you acknowledge and individuals may acknowledge that happiness has a certain part to do with that, doing something that you're interested in has a certain part of doing that. But the bottom line for schools is, I said it in the news, the bottom line of schools is that schools are measured on the qualifications and the attainment of their pupils. So if that is the marker of success, then you have to kind of go back to, well, what are we assessing? What are we measuring? What are we inadvertently saying is valuable through what we assess? So going back to primary schools, in primary schools, we assess at the end of primary school English and maths. And,
they're what you call the core subjects, right? And of course, that carries with it quite a weight, that term.
Yes, and so and they're both very important, and they both came up regularly in what subjects would you like to learn at school. However, the teachers in my research said, well, regardless of whether we think music's important or art's important or whatever, one, it's not assessed, but also because it's not assessed, it's very rare, if at all, this is what the teachers were saying, that we would get a parent, sorry, getting them all muddled up, a parent coming in going, well, my son is, struggling with music. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
Do you see what I mean? It's always, the focus is always on the English and maths, which is vital. And everybody in my research said it was vital. And I think as primary heads or English leads, just looking at, well, what is what you need? What is the viable level of English and maths that you need to be able to give that space over to all the other things that we think are important?
I'm going to jump in here because, Paula, I've really, really enjoyed our chat today. It's been so interesting hearing about your research and very, very thought-provoking. It's left me with lots of questions, which, in P4C, in philosophy, we love to have lots of questions at the end as well. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and telling us all about your research. And very good luck with the rest of it. I know you haven't got very long until, good luck with your Viva and everything.
Thank you very much. And if anybody's interested in, talking about this, I'm very happy to, for people to contact me and give me their 2 penneth. It's fine.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. Bye for now. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.